I got the knowledge, wisdom, understanding. Now your word, learned your lesson. I got the knowledge, wisdom, understanding. Now your word, learned your lesson.
Erasing the mark of the beast technology, but implanting the seed of spiritual immortality and producing.
With man, let's breathe. The plan must be the rottenness. I plant my seed like a botanist. I show you where the problem is beneath the surface.
Hello, hello. Welcome, friends. My name is Chris. I'm here with the One Great Work Warriors. I'm with Jerry, Brandon, Rick, Jim, and Derek. And today we're bridging a new, dangerous, and scary topic, the topic of conspiracies. And the more we began to open this topic of conspiracies, we started to see that there's this issue of denial. So we're going to call this episode The Conspiracy of Denial. And a lot of times, how our talks come about is we realize that we have conversations with people on the day to day that sometimes those conversations can get difficult. Sometimes they go nowhere. And we come back and we're thinking to ourselves, like, what is the argument that this person I was talking to making? And does it make sense? And we start fleshing it out. And we realize that other people are out there having these same disagreements and arguments and resistances to opening their mind or looking at facts or considering the bigger truth or the bigger picture. And there's those out there who will make fun of anybody who says something that seems a little too far out. They don't want to draw connections. They don't want to think that maybe there's some sort of centralized control of this world or a multi-generational plan to enslave humanity. Sounds like way too far out to some folks. And they just, I don't know if it's they're afraid to look deeper or they're just in straight up denial. And that's a topic we're going to discuss. Or, maybe I'm a crazy conspiracy theorist and I need to be set straight. And if that's the case, I want to know and I want to understand, but I'm willing to stretch my mind and discuss these topics. And so are these wonderful guys who are with me. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic on to my man, Brandon, and I'll let him do a little introduction and we'll go from there.
Howdy, howdy, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to all of these wonderful individuals, who are always willing to make the sacrifice and take the time out of the day, because I'm sure, there's a lot of other things that, hell that we could be doing, but we choose to, try to spread this message. So when you look at this word held denial, um, and no, we're not talking about a river in Egypt, as the great Jordan Maxwell once said, he'll rest in peace. But if we look at the etymology, it actually comes from the word held deny. And then you have the suffix, which is al, which is the act of. So the act of held denying. So when you look at the word held deny, to pretty much held refuse or held to refute. So held denial is the act of asserting contrary or contradiction, to deny or accept something that is true, to deny or to not accept pretty much facts, held the truth. So when we talking about held denial, you recognize that something is present, but in your mindset, you are saying it is not there. So it is almost like an aspect of denying reality, denying the objective world. And when you look at denial from a psychological term, it is actually a psychological defense mechanism, which if anyone is not familiar with what a defense mechanism is, it's we have to always revert back to ancient man, and when something would help occur, something in our external realm, our conscious mind is very fragile. It is extremely fragile, so it can't handle certain traumas. It can't handle certain stimuli, certain he'll overload it, he'll stimuli. So that's when our unconscious will step in to protect the conscious mind. And the reason that is because hell again, the conscious mind is fragile. And if we are getting to certain forms of overstimulation or forms of stress, trauma, and anxiety. It is a means for our unconscious to deal with the situation because we may not be able to cope with it in the present. So it's pretty much like our unconscious is coming in as a means of protection. And that's really what a defense mechanism is. And there are many different forms of, health defense mechanisms, but right now denial is the one hell that we decided to talk about. So I'll pass it on to anyone who wants to take it.
Yeah, sure. I'll chime in, and if we're gonna go over some of the definitions and like we got the denial. Thank you, Brandon. And like so the conspiracy, denying conspiracy. What is that all about? Like, and a lot of people have this programmed, like, you brainwashing of this term, just the word conspiracy, and they slather on theory all over it all the time for whatever fucking reason. And there's it's such a mixed bag, and we can take it from so many different angles of why people want to deny certain things or say conspiracy theory. But just the word in and of itself, conspire, to breathe together in on something, an idea in a project or whatever. It could be for the good or bad. It's just a fucking word. People need to get over this shit sometimes.
It's a good
Like,
point, man.
yeah, like respirer in French means to breathe. Conspirer, like, but they say a complot in French, which is kind of weird. Anyways, so do people understand that their breath is part of their soul, and that the you and I verse, when they're versing with the universe, that they're breathing in on their own life trajectory of whatever their thoughts are, taking it back to the first hermetic principle of mentalism, right? Your state of mind and what you're projecting out into your inner plane, the mental plane, and then, whatever follows through with the emotions and actions that, lead into that, whatever. But people want to deny any kind of conspiracy. Like, what about their mothers and fathers that breathed in on the idea of, whether it was conscious or unconscious, the act of intercourse that produces the baby, and that baby grows up, and all that jazz. Rick, what's good, man? I know you want to chime in, so
Well, no, I was just you make a great point, and I think about that with the word conspiracy. And what drives me crazy is that they've done a masterful job once again of hijacking a word and then painting everybody with that that looks into anything that's not going along with the mainstream narrative. They paint people with this broad brush of you're a conspiracy theorist, and that's all that frustrates me because I hear it from people. Oh, you're one of those conspiracy theorists because I look into different things, and it's really frustrating when you get that. And they do it. I know they do it by design, and they do it masterfully, and it shows. Because now, anytime I find anything I look into that is on the fringe, or it's going against the narrative of what I'm looking into, then that's what you're painted as, a conspiracy theorist. Evidence be damned. It doesn't matter how much evidence you can bring forward to support your claim, you're still getting labeled that conspiracy theorist. And it's really, I think, does a lot of damage. People, I think, as soon as they hear that you get labeled that, then a lot of people tune out. I think I don't even want to hear. That's just more conspiracy nonsense. And I think that's kind of the hill that we got to get over. Is that maybe it is a conspiracy, maybe it's not, but I just think that the evidence, you have to look and find out, look into things and kind of be willing to go there and look at both sides of things, and not, and it's just frustrating. Is my point, is that anything that you look into that is different, you're a conspiracy theorist, and you're one of those people, and it does damage. I think it does do damage, to be honest. So if anyone wants to chime in on that, would be very cool.
Yeah, when I think of denial, the first thing that pops up for me is addiction. And I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I never really was in denial. I always knew I had a problem, but so many people, like to this day that I know who've been drinking like every day. They say they don't have a problem. They're in denial. You know, there's so many people, drug addicts out there. Like I've seen them. So everybody knows people like this, and so they can't even be honest with themselves. You know, and so when we talk about conspiracies, like, and you can really show people like these things are true. Like this Operation Northwoods that the CIA um, was declassified. You can point to stuff like that where they had a conspiracy to create a situation where it made to make it look like Cuba was bombing America, but it like so it's you could actually visibly see this stuff, but people don't want to look at it. Like they don't want to look at themselves. They don't want to be honest with themselves. They can't even go like they can't even if they can't be honest with themselves. They don't even want to like look at the truth outside of themselves, right? I don't know if that makes any sense. And a lot of it is to been listening to John Taylor Gatto interviews lately, and he's the author of the book Dumbing Us Down and big advocate of behind the homeschooling movement and all that. And he talks about the history of the schooling of education and like that is such a conspiracy and it's so great to hear him break it down and but we've all been brought up in that conspiracy that schooling conspiracy like it's part of people living in denial I think too um but yeah let's see what Jerry has to say because I could say more later.
Well, I want to say that we're conspiring right now to talk about the subject of conspiracy of denial. So when I forgot what I was going to say. But anyways, when Chris talked about, they make fun of us or they make fun of conspiracy theorists, I would have most likely done the same. I would probably laugh at somebody for being a chubby when I was in the past, but that's not funny. But I'm gonna get into when I'm talking about denial, I'm not talking about refusing a request. Um, so Brandon broke it down. Denial is refusing to acknowledge the truth, something like that. And when I'm talking about conspiracy, I'm not talking about conspiracy theory, although I do have a link that I'll put in the description box. It's an interview with Richard Grove with Pete Quinones talking about how the word conspiracy, the origins of that word, and how it came after JFK's assassination to dissuade people from looking into it. So, yeah, and I'm not talking about self-denial, although I might talk about it later. But what I am talking about is conspiracy, which Derek already said it's to breathe together, but also it's a noun of action from past participle stem of conspirare, to agree, unite, plot. And I have a couple more definitions for conspiracy. The activity of planning with people to do something. That's my definition. Not the activity of planning to do something illegal or harm someone. No. And I have a definition for denial from the Cambridge.org. An unwillingness to accept that something unpleasant is true, or a statement that something is not true or does not exist. I'll pass it back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Jerry. Like those definitions, very helpful. And, I think one thing I heard quite a few years ago on a great podcast by Freeman Fly was where he kind of broke down the difference between a conspiracy and a mystery. And I think people often confuse those words and the meaning of those words. And what happens is, like for instance, I think 9/11 is a good place to start. September 11th attacks. Most of us are, there's just so many aspects of that situation that don't make sense in the narrative that was given to the public, that was spread across the news, and that, if you still look it up on somewhere like Wikipedia or whatever, they're still going to back up this official story, which was so full of holes and so ridiculous that, you know, um, there's obviously a conspiracy. People conspired to make that happen and to trick people. But even if you didn't believe that there was any trickery going on and that it was just what was told, it would still be a conspiracy, because the whole idea was that these terrorists got together, breathed together this plan to blow up these planes and to blow up these buildings with these planes. And so that would be a conspiracy. Now, it's not a mystery that there was a conspiracy. Um, there's nothing mysterious about it. We know it happened, and we're just not exactly sure what the actual facts are. And so that's where the theories start. And that's where things get tricky, right? Because even if we look at science, what science means is making an observation or a theory, postulate, and then you test that theory over and over and over and over. And if you can, consistently get the same result every time, eventually you can prove a thing to be true, and then other people might test it in another part of the world, slightly different way, slightly different. That's what we call science. It's people like literally trying something over and over. They're testing a theory. So without theories, we can't ever get to science. So theories are necessary and important part of the process of solving a mystery, right? And so many of these things that we discuss are actually mysteries. We don't know personally the people that are doing wrong in many cases. And many times that the story we've been presented to the public either doesn't make sense, has holes in it, or there's contrary aspects to it that disagree with one another or contradict the story itself. And so what we're left with is a mystery, not a conspiracy. We know it's a conspiracy because there were 2 or 3 people more involved. Now, there's nothing wrong with a conspiracy theory if you think about what those words actually mean. There should be no negative connotation to putting those terms together, because we would see that as science of investigating a mystery. That would be a conspiracy theory. That would be part of the process of making it a scientific study. And so that is just kind of like basic thinking 101 that most people are not willing to do. And I just want to, before I pass it on, one thing I've noticed is in this path to truth, when we look at some of the more difficult aspects, like something like 9/11, for a lot of people, that was a huge wake up call. They just couldn't, fathom that there was that extent of conspiracy. Once you look into it, it seems very obvious that there had to be many layers of people working on these plans well before the event happened, which indicates, if you use your strategic brain and your ability to kind of like think, what would it take to do a thing, that this wouldn't be as easy as just some people in another country that had no connection to these buildings or no connection to the government to pull off all this grand trickery and get all these people to say lies and have people ready on the street when the reporter comes along to tell a fake story that everybody is later going to believe. These things indicate that there's a deeper level. And so when it comes to denial, one thing I've noticed often is that people go through stages of grief when it comes to difficult topics, much like a death in the family, and one of those stages of grief is the first stage, like they describe in the stages of grief, is denial. And the person says to themselves, this can't be happening. You might find out that a loved one died in an accident, or something terrible, even worse. That's the first thing in an emotional situation that the mind or a person is going to do. They're going to deny it. It's just natural, right? And then we move on to anger and bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. But it's like a normal, common thing, and we should understand it in others as we understand it in ourselves. But the question here is, what do we do with this knowledge? We know that there's a lot of people out there in denial. And you know that there's people that use those term conspiracy theory as a bit of a dagger. So when you bring up a certain topic that makes them uncomfortable and puts them in that state of denial or anger or bargaining, or depression, they don't want to be in that state. So they quickly ad hominem attack the person who's bringing up the subject that they don't want to think about or hear about. And that helps them not have to ever get to that stage of acceptance and consider the possibilities, which might mean that there's other aspects, other deeper layers that they have to think about. And that can be overwhelming and scary, and it can shut a person down. And some people aren't ready for it. And I understand that. Doesn't make it not frustrating, though. So,
That's true.
Rick, why don't you go next?
No, I just really agree with what you're saying, and it's great how you kind of swapped out conspiracy for mystery. I think that's pretty cool. I was thinking about that, and I agree, and it's kind of what Brandon said. It's like people have this. It's like a defense mechanism, and it makes sense. It totally makes sense that when and people are like going through those stages, and it just seems people get locked in this denial one, and 9/11 was a great example. I've talked to people that still believe the official story. You can bring all the different evidence or whatever you want to the forefront and show them, and they were still not they're not ready to take that leap. And that's what I'm finding, Chris, is that a lot of people are they're in we're all in different stages, and some people, they can go so far, so they'll believe, okay, okay, there's somebody that's in, like, a president or a prime minister in my case or something. They're messing things up. They still believe, okay, if we just swap them out, get somebody better, that's going to fix the problem. They're not realizing that all of government is the problem. So all of it is corrupt. I truly believe that, to even to the highest level. So they're not willing to go the whole distance. They're kind of like stopping, because I think it gets really, it upsets them and it triggers them, and there's a lot of things going on, and I think it is like what Brandon said. It's a defense mechanism. They don't ignore it. Kind of like, they I don't even want to look at it, so I'm just gonna kind of turn my back to it. And I think there's a lot of that going on, despite what evidence is out there. So that's my thoughts. I think that you make a great point, and so did Brandon at the beginning.
Yeah. Since we're on the topic of, the refusal of truth, or, not accepting the objective reality, I had an interesting thing. Oh, it shouldn't be interesting, but I had a certain situation that occurred yesterday because I was at a softball game and I was calling a game behind the plate. And now I kind of have I don't give a fuck mentality. But I overheard some fans behind the plate, and they mentioned Hell Labor Day. And I'm like, oh man, like, "Hell, let me throw out some bait." So I'm like, yeah, people going to celebrate a communist holiday. And it got so quiet because they didn't quite understand what I meant. Because Labor Day, if people don't know, it is a communist holiday. It is a holiday to represent May Day, which is actually celebrated on May 1st in other countries, but in the United States, it's celebrated in September. And the reason for that is because in the late 1800s, you had the International Workers of the World, you had all the secret societies, you had the Knights of Labor. And remember, they were fighting to get 8-hour work hours, within the states, and, all of the conditions. And remember, around May Day, you always had a lot of riots, you always had a lot of partying, because there's a lot of energy. And they gave us pretty much a day for the workers to relax, and it'll keep them somewhat calm. So now we go out there and we cook and we have parties, and we're giving up all of this energy, and we're ignorant, and we don't exactly know what it is that we are celebrating, because we are in denial, because the information is out there, folks, if you don't quite grasp it. And it was interesting because this dude, he said, well, if I get a day off of work, then that makes me a communist. And he was like happy about it. And I'm like, dude, your mindset is the reason why we have the condition of slavery because you are in denial. And not only are you in denial, but you are ignorant. So, and then also, too, remember these conspiracies are like multi-layered because if you go and research, like when Labor Day was trying to be brought upon within the states, they would always throw out this one word, anarchy. Of course, obfuscating the word because there was a lot of bombings and there was a lot of rioters and there was a lot of get your hand out my pocket, situations, because when you have a large group, it's so easy to manipulate that group. So they also started to obfuscate the word anarchy and started to associate it with socialism and communism and use the mind control, which we honestly have to give a round of applause to the social engineers for for con, you know stirring people's consciousness. But I just thought it was so, I don't want to say fascinating, but so disturbing that people still don't know, like why they celebrate these so-called holy days and how many people would just give energy to it, and like just celebrating, these things, like not knowing that you are celebrating a May Day communist, holiday, which, that's where all of the unions came from, which was communism. So yeah, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and well, people just want to find any kind of excuse to drink and go out barbecue, whatever the fuck, and stay in their comfort zone. And that's like, I feel like psychologically speaking, this is why a lot of people want to deny certain things and yeah, we live in the age of instant information, and what they've, learned is a little bit contradictory towards, what we've discovered through, you know, looking behind the curtain, or all that, whatever the fuck, going down rabbit holes, whatever people want to call it, semantics. I mean, Jesus Christ, what the hell is going on with people just like, oh, it's there's so many programmed terms, like, I mentioned before, but aside from all that, like, people are, yeah, the comfort zone, so it's easy to just like deny and brush things off on the side. And it's like, where do they go from there? They got it all figured out. Everyone has their smartphones, their little slabby dab, and, all this shit. And people on CNN, motherfucking, Saturday Night Live, and all these motherfuckers, talking heads, they're talking shit about us, about, like people that, talk about like, and yeah, like going back to 9/11, what's the term that they use that, like, oh, you're one of those 9/11 was an inside job people, like these program terms, right? That just, have people hung up on just like, okay, so that's what it is. Like, these are people that believe in false information when they're operating off of the false information themselves. So, it's like, how much in denial are they in, as opposed to how much like negative knowledge that they're just like so convinced like that's the truth at the same time. But yeah, we can, you know just say like there's the ignorance part of it, like they're denying looking into certain things that we might bring up in a conversation or whatever. But going back to like the controlled opposition, whatever, like the talking heads, they're going to try to explain it all out for them in a jokey joke kind of way. These are the fucking, the negative side part of the trickster, like the modern day gesture fuckers, whatever,
Right. Yeah.
and they're getting paid,
Yep.
millions of dollars to, do whatever, right? So it's sad, we're up against some steep competition as far as like putting out the real message through like really good media and all this stuff,
Yeah. You
you know?
make a great point, Derek, with ignorance too, because I think ignorance and denial are definitely dancing partners. They're just
Takes two to
it's where
tango.
they're tangoing together because I just think of that. How many people? are not even willing to look into a subject or a topic or anything. It doesn't, like I said, I brought information to people, they won't even look at it. They won't even, and it's some type of emotional reaction they're going through, and they won't even look at it, and so they want to stay ignorant of it. So it's just they're definitely working together. This ignorance and denial for sure.
And to piggyback what Derek was talking
Yeah.
about, like the mainstream media will say, if you don't buy into climate change, then you're in denial. If you
Hmm.
don't, think that COVID was real, then you are have denial. So they always spin, how the narrative and obfuscate these words.
Yeah, totally. Um, yeah, I always keep thinking, I always compare addiction with government and that. And like I said earlier, I always think of denial when it comes to addiction. And the first step of AA is like we admitted that we're powerless over alcohol. Or we admit, no one wants to admit reality. People don't want to admit that they are contributing to harming so many people around the world and causing harm to others. And that, I mean, that's just the biggest problem, right? People don't want to admit. It's the same thing as denying, right? But it takes a long time, like to correct yourself. Like if you're an alcoholic, it takes a long time to get sober, to get clean. And if people really want to work on admitting to themselves about, the harm that they're contributing to, it takes a long time as well. Like just like any of us, when we first came to the conclusion of what's really happening, we didn't just click and right away. You didn't go run out and start like telling the world. It. I'm sure like it took a year or a couple of years. Like for me, like it took me over a year to like be comfortable talking about this stuff. To process it, and I still am. But just that, that it definitely takes time. But that's how difficult it is for people to even um they don't they don't want to admit it. They don't even realize that they have a problem, that there is a problem. They don't think that there's a problem. So I just think there's a big correspondence there with the addiction. People are addicted to government. They don't see it like even put that together, but because their life's good enough, so it helped they get through, but they um they don't want to admit there's a big problem that goes along with it. So
Yeah, like people that are in prison for many years, when they finally get out, it's like they don't know what to do. They've been so used to living in that prison that that's the only thing that seems normal, and anything outside of that can become scary
Yeah.
and make you nervous. And there is a process to realizing um, the true nature of the problem we're dealing with in the world. The reason I have the End Evil podcast, I remember specifically for me, I came across the topic of weather engineering and chemtrails, weather modification. There's geoengineeringwatch.org with Dane Wigington, and I came across one of his presentations. And even though it struck me at first, as a lot of people would, like, this seems kind of like a wild conspiracy theory, right? That's what crossed my mind at that time. But I was curious, and I've always been a curious guy. And partly what led me to even being able to look at something like 9/11 was I was already curious about things like UFOs or strange happenings in the world, mysteries, right? I loved mysteries and I liked trying to look into them. So as I started looking into the geoengineering and weather engineering topic, I found more. The more I looked, the more I found. And even in our own skies, the more I watched, I had more questions and more questions. And I began to take pictures and I began to talk with people about it. And like Jim was saying, there was a period of like a full year, and then even a second year where I was going through this process of kind of like letting go of everything that I thought reality was and reaccepting it for what I see it now as something that there is um, a vast network of control that's beneath the surface layer that most people see. And it goes back well beyond one generation. You know, there's a many generational continuity on this plan for very few individuals to have power over a lot of other individuals. And there's a lot of aspects of subject matter that you can look in that are indicative of this problem and that will highlight um, little parts of this huge iceberg. We only can see like an iceberg part of what's coming out of the water, but that tells us the shape of the bigger problem. And there are so
Chris, are you
many.
talking about books like None Dare Call It a Conspiracy, something like that?
That's a great one to look into. Another one that I was going to bring up, sort of different topic than chemtrails, is look up Lloyd Pye and Everything You
Right.
Know Is Wrong. That was one that really shifted my thinking on a whole nother topic. But there's so many things like that, So I'll pass it on. Who's up next?
One thing that I wanted to bring up is, people who buy into collectivist ideology are some of the biggest ones who are in hell denial, and they aren't concerned for the truth. They aren't really concerned about the objective reality. So people who buy into like cults or groupthink aren't concerned or don't care for the truth, just as though somebody who is in denial will reject the truth, because the individual, which the word individual is someone who is not divided. The prefix "in" is first, etymological root means not. So the word individual means not divided, not inside divided. So people who don't understand that word will misuse it. So one who is not divided, because it is the individual who should be concerned with truth. It is the individual who has the capacity to think. It is the individual who has the capacity to emote. A group doesn't have, all of that. So why would a group be concerned with truth? Why would a cult be concerned with truth? Why would a collectivist be concerned with truth? Because they are in group think. So collectivists are some of the biggest ones who are in hell denial. And it doesn't matter what kind of collectivist mindset it is. They are the ones who are in the most deadliest form of hell denial. And we've seen that, hell throughout history. All of the societies that were based on collectivism, denying objective morality, denying how natural law, and look what happened. Look what happened. Massive, massive forms of death. Because denial and collectivism go hand in hand, hand in hand. They're pretty much married. Denial, collectivism, and ignorance, as Rick said earlier.
Yeah, like if you don't claim your freedom, someone else will.
Yeah, yeah.
If you don't claim your rights, then in this world, other people will say they do own your rights. And if you don't, make sure that you defend them, then you lose them in a way, even though that should not be.
I have a question for everyone here: is why is it that people are still in denial? Like, why is it?
That's a good question. I was just thinking that, Brandon. I honestly God, I was sitting there thinking, like, why are people in that state? And I think that's probably 5 shows we could do on that.
Yeah.
Because there's so many different reasons why people are in denial. What I'm thinking about, like where I was just thinking was you guys were talking about this. It's great that you brought it up. Is one aspect I look at it is like, what if your life is based on a certain belief, or your job is based on a certain, doing a certain duty, and then when you find out the evidence that maybe what your belief is or your job is causing harm, then you go into this state of denial that it's not, because your whole livelihood could be based on this. And I think about that with like the damage that religions have done, organized religions, and this authority figures, name them. I just think that, once your identity is kind of solidified like that, and that is who you are, and that's something you believe for so long, it doesn't matter what kind of evidence or what people can bring to you, or even if you try to see it, maybe even if you see it yourself that you're causing harm. You know that, but then you go into this state of denial because you're basically changing it. It's questioning your whole being, I guess is a good word, your whole belief system. If you guys know what I mean, I'm kind of all over there, but that's where I was thinking. Like, kind of what I was thinking is that I can see how people go into this, fall into that state of denial, especially if it's going to change their life drastically in a lot of
Yeah, we
ways. I
call that
think.
a paradigm shift, or like
Yeah,
having
yeah,
one's paradigm shattered, rather. And a lot of
ex-
people are
great
scared to
point.
death
Thank you.
about that, which is
Yep.
why there is that big thing in denial. And I was wondering if Jerry had any interesting thoughts about that or anything else.
Well, Derek, thanks for asking. So
Yeah,
I
buddy.
wrote something that aligns with what you guys have been saying, which is they think they're right and they try to make you the crazy one, or at least they make me the crazy one. And they believe that. But I want to get into the causes. So addressing Brandon's question. So you mentioned it is a defense mechanism. So they want to minimize the pain, and that's why denial occurs. It's natural. And here's a quote by Mark Passio. Anyone who believes, anyone who actually believes that the truth is capable of being suppressed and ultimately destroyed is living in a deep state of fear, illusion, and denial. So what comes to mind is what you said, Brandon, that denial and collectivism goes hand in hand. Uh, Back to you, Chris.
Well, I think one thing we got going here in the modern day that is different than many other times in history is we have like all these different types of media. We have all these social media channels, and there's just like a vast amount of bullshit out there. And I think that kind of puts many people in the state of, I just don't know what to believe anymore. Because, like so many people will tell you, if you go on the internet, you can find anything. You can find someone that will argue that there's a such thing as rainbow unicorns. There probably is a website about that. And so some people kind of throw up their hands. They're just like, it's overwhelming. And I think overwhelming is the term that comes to my mind when Brandon's asking why are people stuck in the state of denial. Like as Jerry just said, I think it's natural to first have that denial. It's a natural part of trauma, of grief. But when you stay in it and you can't get out of it, is you're just so overwhelmed by the topic or what it implies that you can't face it. People that have been raped often cannot tell the story, or they cannot point their finger on the person that did it because they're so traumatized and they're so afraid of what might happen to them or their family that they actually can't do it. They can't say it. They can't even look at it, or they can't go back to the place where that thing happened because it brings up so much trauma that they can't even imagine facing that amount of pain and frustration. And for many folks, the types of topics we're talking about are pushing them into those zones. I mean, I look at what I went through, like I was talking about, the more I studied 9/11, the more deeper I got into looking into weather modification. I mean, I couldn't find 100% answers, but I knew that there were a lot of things that were being said in the public that were total bullshit, and I could break them apart myself, with things that are very common sense and logical, and explain them to someone else. And as you guys are pointing out, often the answer I get from people is not, oh, I disagree with you and here's why. It's like, I'm going to change the subject. I'm going to go right back into my state of denial. Because if I did follow the chain of what you're saying and think about it, it would force me to risk my state of being. I might have to spend the next year looking at the sky myself and thinking about it. I might have to spend a bunch of time and energy reinventing what I thought reality was. And that's a big job. And I think subconsciously, even if someone hasn't like uh, thought that out, that their physical being itself senses what that would imply, and it starts to block them off, almost like the body will do in extreme state of trauma, like I'm saying, or a bomb blew up and you're laying there in pieces. Your brain will try to make you feel better. It'll bring up imaginary things. You might have dreams. It'll try to protect you from extreme trauma. And a lot of times that's where people get multiple personalities and this type of thing, because they're traumatized so severely that their natural being self ego cannot identify with the situation because it's too extreme and it's too overwhelming, and they cannot. It's like being close to fire. It's too hot. They can't take it. And so I think it's understandable for a lot of people because the trauma is extreme. And when we start looking into these things, the last thing I kind of wanted to bring up is about human trafficking and sex trafficking. And when you think a little bit about this topic, even if there was one child in your town or city that this was happening to, everybody should care and make sure it stops. But this is so prevalent that it's actually more than 1 in 4 females that get sexually abused as children or in sometime in their early life. And it's probably a bigger number than that. And that just goes to show just how prevalent and how evil our society is, that can be going on. And people don't see that as a big enough deal to change things and look deeper into why is this happening, and stop everything until we deal with that. You know what I mean? But it's still going on a mass scale. And if people haven't seen that movie Sound of Freedom yet, I highly recommend to check it out, because people need to understand the depth and the width of this problem. We might be in a worse time of slavery than humanity has ever been in. It's just more hidden behind the scenes and kind of shrouded in, and people aren't seeing it because we're stuck on these screens, because we're going to work, because we're in traffic, and we're not being exposed to it. And so it's happening in places we don't see it. And if we keep our eyes closed, we feel okay. And we don't want to feel uncomfortable and depressed and sad. So depressing as that is, that's the point I wanted to make. And anybody else want to jump off of that?
Yeah, because Jerry had said that the people who are in the now think that they are, I guess, subduing the pain. It's only short term. In the long term, you're actually creating more pain for yourself. You create psychological pain, emotional pain, mental pain, and spiritual pain. And Chris, you nailed it on the head. With the why, because some of the things that I came up with, uh, people are just weak. Sadly, people are mentally weak. People are spiritually weak, and I think that's one of the factors on why they want to stay in the now. Two, trauma. Of course, we have mind control, and then, like Chris said, attachment. People subconsciously recognize in today's world the effects and consequences that come along with truth. You know, they subconsciously know it. So it may not be a conscious knowing, but they subconsciously know it. So they understand that if they was to shatter their reality and come to this realization that they would be the ones ostracized, that they would be the ones who could possibly, you know, lose their job or, have whatever because they posted something on Facebook. They are the ones who could be canceled because we've seen this happen too many times. So, subconsciously, they are aware of it. And because so many people have lost touch with the spiritual side of man, they think that it's just physical. So they don't want to lose their material possessions, Hell, they don't want to lose that, have that nice job or whatnot. So they have become attached to things. They have this egoic attachment to things or to their position, their job, their status. So therefore, they would rather choose to keep the blinders on than face the truth and reality.
Boom. Yeah.
Great
And
point, man.
Chris, I wanted to respond to what you were saying about the whole trauma thing. Brandon, I feel you too on what you said for sure. Not like we're a fucking yes man or whatever the hell, right? But as far as like trauma and like so many of us, grew up in, the public school system. You're growing up with a bunch of people, your peers, whatever. And like, there's so many ways that we get belittled when we're little. And like when you're especially in the classroom or whatever recess and you're like doing something wrong, like you're going to be laughed at all the angles, right? So like that creates a lot of trauma for people, and like no one wants to be like wrong about anything. And so like yeah, Brandon, what you're saying about the ego attachment, like people are going to have certain ego attachments to whatever fucking degree throughout their life, as far as like what they learned and how they learned it and blah blah blah, and what they filtered out and in and all around. So I find that interesting on the psychological level. There's so much more to, break down with that in and of itself. What Chris touched on as far as, like how much of that trauma is really lingering within the individual as they grow up as an adult. And there's like all these other forms of information that are like contradicting what they previously learned, whether it be their belief system, religion, 9/11, or like, not to dwell on that. It seems like an ancient fucking relic. It's like it's kind of laughable to me, like people saying or questioning and like in a joking manner, like, "Oh, you think 9/11 is an inside job?" Like who? Where have you been for the past fucking 2 decades? I don't know. Like sometimes, like, but whatever. Like so, yeah. I'm gonna pass it off to Jim. What's cracking? I haven't heard you in a minute. Uh, yeah, there's a lot of trauma to be uh, revealed and healed within pretty much every individual, because as we said in previous podcasts, the moment of birth, there's like that traumatic experience of the suffering, like, you know Chris, you had some live shows on that recently, which is great. And Evil podcast, that's what's up. So yeah, I was trying to pass it to Jim. What's good, man? I'm not trying to
Thanks, Derek.
skip around. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I guess I'll just like triple down on the whole addiction thing. And like Jerry was saying, people want to minimize the pain. That's why people drink. And Brandon's saying how, you minimize the pain, but it keeps compounding the more you drink, and it affects your family and the cause and effect of that. And it's the same thing. Like people just don't want to admit that there's a problem. It's so hard to admit it. And that's why it's easier just to be in denial and just get your fix, right? Um, just another thing that I had written down here was I had watched that movie recently, the Lark and Rose, the Jones Plantation, and Mr. Smith. One of the biggest points that came up was Mr. Smith said, the greatest trick is to get people to believe that people like me can never actually exist, and like and or do these kind of things like 9/11 inside job. Like people just can't even believe that there's people like that exist, could do that. And so like that's a huge part of denial, because people just can't believe it. But that's how powerful that the conspirators are. So I'll pass it on.
Yeah, this topic, today's just the beginning as far as I'm concerned. We're opening up this can of worms, and I want to mix it around some more on future weeks and open up this roundtable discussion to other folks that might want to pop into. There's so many examples of conspiracy things that people want to either throw out the baby with the bathwater or deny completely, or not hear the rest of it, you know. And we're living in a time that the things are really adding up, and I think even people that are in denial are starting to recognize that, well, something's going to happen, it's probably not going to be good, right? But anybody have any closing thoughts before we finish up today?
Yeah. Um, I know that there are a lot of people out there who know what's going on, or may be knowledgeable on a particular subject. Um, our whole message is to try to inspire people to get activated and to get involved. So if you are one of those people, you can reach out to me, or reach out to one of us, and we can possibly help you and inspire you, because I recently put out two videos trying to show people, like, hey, here's our beginner videos to try to you know try to at least jump into content creation, because it doesn't matter if we continue to put out videos or watch videos. If not enough of us are teachers and activated and willing to jump into this fight, we all fucking lose. We all fucking lose. So the whole message is to try to inspire others to get off your fucking lazy ass. Like, we can use some fucking help. We can use a lot more teachers about how natural law, a lot more teachers about how consciousness, about a lot more teachers explaining to other people on how the state is fucking immoral because it's based on violence, coercion, and theft. Like, I don't do this stuff just for people to sit back, and just watch the shit, and jump into the comments, or like into the chat. I do it to inspire others to get off your fucking lazy ass. And that's what I want to see more of. You know, not I don't want to see more views. I want to see more people getting involved. And that's my closing message. Get motherfucking involved. Stop being a fucking coward.
Yeah, strong message for a strong good reason, because there is damn good reason. And I agree with Jim that this is very much like an addiction problem. Humans are addicted to feeling good and feeling comfortable, and they don't want to do this hard work, and really the first step, everybody's like, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? The first step is to fucking be aware of the problem. Like, Brandon's saying, if you are aware of the problem, then helping other people become aware of the problem is the thing to do. We don't need to go out there with machine guns and hunt down George Soros or whatever, or the New World Order. That's not what we're telling you to do, and we don't think that's the solution. What we're telling you to do, and what we think the solution is to admit that we have a problem, right? And if you recognize that problem and you're willing to admit that problem, then the next thing is to try to help other people see it. Anybody else want to add to that?
I got
No, but I just
Yeah,
had some closing thoughts. No, Jerry, go for it, man. I'll go after.
well, all right. Well, I'll just close with, yeah, first of all, Brandon, that's a quote right there. And Jim, hats off to you for bringing out that quote from that movie, The Jones Plantation. So yeah, just wanted to end it on how feelings aren't meant to be suppressed. Like, we have to use our anger as fuel to take action and put out more media on truth, natural law, objective morality, chemtrails, 9/11, like the whole 9 yards. And yeah, while we're on the topic of denial, I definitely have an example. I definitely was in denial. Like, I am in denial today. Like, not gonna lie. And I said I was gonna fast. I ended up eating. That's uncomfortable, but it starts with telling the truth. And I just wanted to say that for the past couple weeks, like, I've been drinking and smoking weed, and I was sober for about 8 months. And I was in denial, said, you know what, I can do this and be fine. I used to go to AA, and it's just, I was inspired by watching Will Keller on the roundtable discussion, just how he was able to just present. And I hope I bring value to you and inspire you to take action.
Thanks, Jerry.
Fuck yeah, yeah. Yeah. So going real back to, I wanted to finish up on the whole psychology thing because, shadow work is something that's almost like a fucking buzzword. But like to get into the nitty-gritty things, people need to really check themselves and like introspect on, these triggers. Like, why are they denying certain things? Like, why, ask the question, like, and like do some self-reflection on like like is there some cognitive dissonance going on? That's a key word in this whole discussion that was not mentioned before, I believe. I just wanted to throw that out there. But also, all that aside, do your fucking shadow work, inner work, all that good shit. uh
Good
wow,
point.
conspiracy, like the word, like big fucking deal, right? Like people want to throw in like theory all the time. But what is science all about? Scientists are theorizing on all types of things all the fucking time. But, that aside, again, like uh we're not looking to like see about, who's conspiring about what the fuck. We're just looking to get down to the truth, the God-loving truth, the goddamn truth, whatever you want to call it, right? And that's what really matters, and that's what's in our hearts, that's what we care about. And I think that is the generative, aspect or principle of what should be the fire lit within the hearts of people to, seek that within themselves and the reality that we live in so we can live in a better world and a better life, better relationships with people, the micro to the macrocosm, a lot of correspondence, all that shit.
Yeah, it's thanks, Derek. Jim or Rick, did you guys have any last words?
Well, I was gonna mention shadow work, but Derek got to it before me and said it perfect. And so I will just say I agree with what Derek was saying, and it'll kind of tie into what Jim said earlier too. Is that stop? Maybe people should do the shadow work and stop living in denial and be willing to really examine themselves and what they believe. I think that's so important. I think that's the foundation. I really do. I think the inner work is where it all starts. If you can't, like Jim was saying, if you're living in denial and you can't even be honest with yourself, I don't know how you're gonna ever be able to put that outwardly. So I think a lot of people do live in denial, and you have to be willing to do the work on yourself. And maybe if your life is in chaos and things are going wrong, you have to maybe admit to yourself that maybe you're part of the problem of what's going on in your life and all of what's going wrong. And maybe what you're doing in your life as a job or your belief system, maybe that's causing harm. Maybe maybe you're part of the problem, and you have to stop living in that denial and really examine that. So, I mean, everybody else said it perfectly. I think that's so important, and I do agree with what Brandon said. We need more people, doing the work and getting out there and putting the information out there. So, I think this could be discussed for another episode, to be honest, or a couple episodes, because there's so many things going on that are causing what we're talking about with denial and conspiracy and that. So, you guys said it perfectly. That's what I was going to end with.
Thanks, Rick.
Um, yeah, I have the 12 steps of AA in front of me, and I never really was a like big steps guy, and I kind of dodged that because that shit's tough. But the first step, of course, is we admitted we were powerless, right? Or we could say we can admit that we're slaves or that our lives are unmanageable with the government. But that's right there. And then the next two steps get into like God, and a lot of people in denial of God. And Chris, that's like, I mean, there's so much more you can go with this subject. So that's another aspect of it you can go into further. But I just wanted to mention the fourth step, which is a big deal. Made a searching and a fearless moral inventory of ourselves. So after you're admitting that you have a problem and then accepting, that there's a higher power that can help you, and that then, that's like now you're starting to get into the shadow work, like Derek and Rick are talking about. You doing that moral inventory. So yeah, I just thought it's cool. Like there's definitely a correlation there with addiction and denial, obviously. So
Mhm.
but yeah, thank you guys. And the last thing I'll say is if anyone hasn't checked out that movie, it's really cool to get people to think. If you have people who are in denial and you want to get a little help, uh get them to watch the movie The Jones Plantation, get them to think about this stuff. Like what's good metaphor for what's really going on.
Yeah, that's jonesplantationfilm.com is where you can go. And I watched that movie. I loved it. We're going to do another little local showing here on Friday if all goes as planned. And I recommend everybody see that film, discuss it. Jim went as far as, like discussing it with some younger people, which I think is fantastic, and seeing if they understand, because it's a metaphor for the way we're living. So that's one thing I wanted to shout out on that other topic that I was bringing up of sex slavery and trafficking. I want people to go to see Rick's radio show. That's on Revolution Radio. He's on Studio A. Rick, how does someone find your older episodes? Because that was Monday when I listened to that episode you had with the gal who had been a victim, and she'd been groomed into a lifestyle of being trafficked for sex, and didn't deserve that. And the people around her didn't protect her. Her parents, her community, all turned a blind eye and denied it was happening, even though it was pretty obvious. And the last she's telling that story and wrote a book about it. The victims, I mean, the evil ones who did the deeds are still at large. And so, Rick, where do people find that?
Yeah, just go to revolution.radio. And what you do is go to the top of the page. There's an archive section. So you just click on that. It'll give you the password and what you need to log in. Very simple. It takes 2 seconds and you can save it so you don't have to keep entering it in every time you go to the archive. And that was the latest episode that I just did this Monday. It was with Rachel Timothy, and she has a book also you can find on Amazon called Open Blind Eyes, and you can still get it. So I would really recommend that you grab that book of hers and check out the interview I did with her. It's a powerful one, and one that I think people need to hear. So yeah, just head over to revolution.radio to the archive section. And my name is Crypt. My show is Crypt Ricks. I've been thinking, and you'll
Yeah,
find
and you
all of
can
my
find him
episodes there.
on YouTube as well. And
Yep,
then
Rumble.
I also want to send people to check out Brandon Spencer's recent work, some tutorials on how to do this work, OBS. Brandon, that's on your Odyssey channel.
Yes, and if you can't watch it, then update your hardware. Uh, I'm sorry, but if you can't watch a video in X265, then get rid of your ancient hardware, your dinosaur hardware. Like it's 2023, folks. I'm sorry, like it's
Hey,
just
this is
not
modern
possible.
literacy, is
Yeah,
learning how to, you
like
know, watch a video or
right,
share a
like
video.
Yep.
If you don't know how, ask for help. Like Brandon said, there's people out here like him that will happily help you, you know,
and then we got
because
Seed 5 coming up
that's
next
the next
month.
thing I was going to bring up. September 24th and 25th, go to seedtruth.com and you can learn some more. Get on the mailing list. They got a mailing list now to keep you updated, or
Yep.
check them out on Facebook. Got Brandon Martin, Nate Cap, Douglas Martin, and Brandon Spencer's going to be presenting. It's going to be a fabulous weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. So
Yep.
that's all, I think, everything I could think of to advertise, except for, check out my show and Evil Podcast Thursdays, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. And that's it. I think everybody good.
Yep. Wonderful
Great
show.
show, good conversation, and we're going to keep this ball rolling and feel the inspiration, feel the burn, get to work, folks. We need your help.
Yeah, peace out. Much love, yo.